Well, for this homily today, I brought along a stage prop. My stage prop here is designed to look like a Roman shield. I built it in 8th grade many years ago, and I used this shield when we had snowball fights. I was pretty good with my arm, and as we charged up the hill, this was my protector as I tried to wipe out our enemy. I found it in my parents' house a couple of years ago when they moved, so I thought it'd be very appropriate to bring it to this homily today. I need this shield. It was in the basement of my parents' house, and so I decided to bring it. But the main reason I decided to bring it is because I will probably need some protection from various barbs, purses, or shoes that may be thrown at me today when I explain that second reading from St. Paul. Most Sundays' Gospels, or most Sundays' epistles, most Sundays' homilies are based on the Sunday Gospel. But today I'm going to base it on that second reading from St. Paul and those great words, wives should be subordinate to their husbands. As most of you know, I'm a married permanent deacon, and I don't find a problem with that phrase at all. And to all you married men out there, isn't that a great line? Wives should be submissive to their husband. Why do women have a problem with that? Okay, so far so good. No throwing. I got down low because I thought I may be getting hit with some missiles. But earlier versions of this gospel, or this epistle, used the word submissive rather than subordinate. And don't you married men agree that submissive sounds better than subordinate? I mean, doesn't submissive really say it all? Don't you agree? Well, at any rate, all kidding aside, let's get serious. This scripture passage is probably one of the most misunderstood and misinterpreted scripture passages in all of the New Testament. Most people and deacons don't even want to discuss it at their homily. But as a deacon, and most importantly, as a married deacon, I'm going to try to explain my interpretation of why St. Paul wrote this phrase almost 2,000 years ago. Unfortunately, regardless of Paul's intention, when wives hear this, wives be subordinate to your husbands, as soon as they hear the phrase, they just sit there and they turn everything else off. They don't hear anything else of the great reading that has to be said. And on the converse side, when the men hear wives be subordinate to their husbands, they say, hey, that's a great idea. I like that. And they turn off the rest of the reading. And obviously, on the surface of it, this reading is sexist. However, if Paul were in church here today, I would tell him that his choice of words, be it subordinate or submissive, is very poor. As a married man and with a family, I would tell St. Paul that those words don't work in a marriage. At least they wouldn't work in my marriage. If I used the word submissive or subordinate, my wife Pat would show me the door right now. No way. But before I chastising St. Paul for saying these words, we have to look at it in the sense of our modern culture. We have to look at St. Paul's use of the words in considering the culture and the time in which they were written. These were written almost 2,000 years ago, and that's the key to understanding them. What was the culture women lived in at that time? Even today, in countries like Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, women are treated like dirt. Women in these countries don't make any decisions of their own. They're basically without any autonomy. Their clothes, they're wearing, what they do, are all controlled by their husbands. In fact, today, in the women's right to vote in our country, they were not allowed to vote until 1920, just a little over 100 years ago. So 2,000 years ago, when Paul wrote these letters, women were considered property. They had no rights whatsoever. They were good for cooking, sewing, and procreating, having kids. It was obviously a different time and culture. In my opinion, St. Paul wrote these epistles to challenge the men. The men, Paul knew that women had no rights, so he put that in there anyway, because it was a given. But it was a matter of fact. Women already were subordinate. But St. Paul also knew they were not inferior. Women played a very important part in his readings in the New Testament. Here St. Paul then hits the men right between the eyes, and that's the whole point of the homily. Husbands, love your wives. Husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. That's the gist of the whole homily, and that's the thrust of this homily. Men had never really heard that before. Men had never heard, love your wife, respect your wife, honor your wife. That was the core message of Jesus, love. So in my opinion, Paul's message of advice to the women was already a given. They knew that. But men had never heard it before, to love your wife and honor your wives. And he really kind of put it to them. It was a different time, place, and culture when he wrote these. These writings were very logical when placed in the entire context of that age. So what message do we bring from this for this epistle today to Glenview or Niles or Morton Grove? Sometimes one of the things I see in family life that occurs that is really unfortunate is the verbal abuse. Verbal abuse. It's very easy to lose your patience and to lose your temper with your spouse or your wife. Verbal abuse is that sharp-tongued jab, the put down, that smart aleck remark. Verbal abuse is humiliating your spouse or a female member, or a family member, not a female member of your family, making fun of them and laughing at them. And it's not necessary. Both spouses can be guilty of this. So verbal abuse demeans the human spirit. And it really is because the ones we should be loving the most are the ones we're abusing. Usually our spouse and our family. If St. Paul were writing this today, I hope he would say, be partners with your husband. Husbands, be a good partner for your wife. Marriage has to be a partnership based on love and mutual respect. So in closing, subordinate or submissive should never be a part of a marriage. The main thrust of this homily was really summed up in the very first two lines of that second reading. And they are, brothers and sisters, be subordinate to one another and out of reverence for Christ. And if I were to paraphrase it another way, I'd say, husbands, love your wives. Wives, love your husbands. Pray that your married love is a love. It's compassionate. Be compassionate to your love and it's respectful, and a love that's unselfish. So I hope my interpretation of this reading today gives you a better understanding, and I hope I won't need this when I walk out the south door to protect myself from your verbal abuse.
Thank you for participating in the digital liturgy today. The digital ministry touches the lives of many people, as does almost 80 other ministries here at OLPH. Grateful for the community that connects to OLPH through this digital forum. It's unbelievable how many people are able to access the liturgy and other events because of this ministry. Please consider supporting OLPH. All of your sacrifices help to sustain this parish and to keep moving us into the future. Thank you very much, and keep watching.